The little girl kept counting the coins on the table, her tiny fingers trembling, as if each one carried the weight of her father's quiet struggle. Across from her, the man forced a smile, pretending not to notice how carefully she arranged them, pretending not to feel the ache deep in his chest. Tonight was supposed to be something special, but even something as simple as a birthday dinner had become an uphill battle. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love to turn lives around, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this one deserve to be heard, and you never know who might need it today. Daniel Carter hadn't always been this version of himself, counting coins, stretching every last dollar, measuring every single choice against bare survival. There was a time when his dreams reached far beyond the cramped walls of his small apartment. But life has a way of wearing dreams down to nothing. When his wife passed away without warning, she took with her the stability, the warmth, and the future they had worked so hard to build together. What remained was Daniel and their daughter Lily. Lily was only 6 years old, but she carried a quiet wisdom that ran deeper than her age. She never complained when the lights flickered because a bill had slipped past due, never asked for toys she understood her father couldn't afford, and never shed a tear when dinner was something plain and small. Instead, she smiled. She always smiled. And that smile became the one thing that gave Daniel the strength to keep pushing forward. Tonight was her birthday. Daniel had promised her something special. Nothing extravagant, nothing out of reach, just a simple dinner at a modest little restaurant downtown. It had taken weeks of saving, skipping his own meals and picking up overtime shifts just to make it happen. And yet, as he sat there watching Lily count those coins, he couldn't help but wonder if even this small dream might slip right through his fingers. The restaurant they stepped into wasn't fancy, but to Lily it looked like pure magic. Warm lights hung from the ceiling like tiny stars, and soft music drifted through the air and wrapped the whole place in comfort. She held her father's hand tight, her eyes wide with wonder, as if she had just walked into something she had never dared to dream about. Daniel straightened his worn jacket, doing his best to hide the fact that it was the only one he'd owned for years. He led Lily to a small table by the window, where the city lights outside glimmered like distant promises. For just a moment, he let himself breathe, let himself believe that maybe this night could actually be everything he hoped. But reality never stays quiet for long. When the waiter handed them the menus, Daniel's heart dropped. The prices were steeper than he had counted on. His eyes moved fast across the page, calculating, trimming, adjusting. He tried to keep his worry off his face, but Lily caught it anyway. She always did. Rather than reaching for what she truly wanted, she quietly picked the cheapest thing on the menu and smiled like it was exactly what she had been hoping for all along. Daniel felt a sharp sting in his chest, not from hunger, not from exhaustion, but from love. The kind of love that makes sacrifice feel both beautiful and almost too heavy to carry. Across the room, someone had been watching them. Sophia Loren had grown up in a world where money made problems disappear before they could even take shape. As the heir to a sizable fortune, she had never once had to choose between what she needed and what she wanted. Her life had been filled with elegance, privilege, and the weight of other people's expectations. And yet, for all that she had, there was a hollow feeling inside her she could never quite put her finger on. That evening, she had come to the restaurant looking for a distraction, hoping to step away from the endless grind of business meetings and conversations that never seemed to mean anything. But instead of finding that distraction, she found something she wasn't prepared for at all. She found Daniel and Lily. At first, it was just a passing glance, a brief look at a father and daughter sharing a quiet meal. But then the details started to register. The careful way Daniel counted his money, the way Lily chose her meal without a single moment of hesitation, the way the two of them smiled at each other like nothing else in the entire world existed. It was real, raw, and it caught Sophia completely off guard. She found herself unable to look away. There was something in what they shared that felt genuinely pure, something she had never come close to experiencing despite everything she owned. It wasn't about what they had, it was about what they meant to each other. As the evening wore on, Daniel did everything he could to make the night feel special. He told Lily stories, made her giggle, and kept a steady smile on his face, even while the worry gnawed away at him underneath. Because inside he carried a constant fear of falling short, of not being enough for the little girl who was counting on him for absolutely everything. When the check finally came, that fear turned real. Daniel stared down at it, his hands tightening ever so slightly. He had miscalculated.
Despite all his careful planning, he was just a little short. Not by much, but enough to matter. Panic flashed briefly across his face. Lily noticed again. She reached over and wrapped her small hand around his, squeezing gently. That tiny gesture carried more reassurance than most words ever could. It was as if she was telling him that it was okay, that she didn't need anything more, that she already had everything that mattered. But Daniel couldn't let himself accept that. He had made her a promise. He had promised himself he wouldn't let her down. And then something happened that he never saw coming. Before Daniel could get a word out to the waiter, before he could even figure out his next move, the check was quietly lifted from the table. He looked up, confused, his pulse jumping. Sophia was standing there. She didn't carry herself like someone trying to make an impression or put her wealth on display. There was no arrogance in how she held herself, no sense of superiority in the way she looked at them. There was something softer instead, something that almost looked like vulnerability. Without drawing any attention to herself, she took care of the situation in a way that felt almost invisible. The staff acknowledged her quietly, and within moments, the pressure that had been sitting on Daniel's chest began to lift. But Sophia didn't walk away right then. She paused just long enough to look at Lily, offering her a gentle smile. In that brief exchange, something passed between them that didn't need any words to be understood. Lily smiled right back, her innocence closing a gap that no amount of conversation could have bridged. Daniel got to his feet, not quite sure how to respond. He was filled with gratitude, but with confusion too. Kindness like this wasn't something he was used to, not from a stranger, not without some kind of catch attached to it. Sophia simply gave a quiet nod, as if to say that no explanation was necessary. Then she turned and walked away, leaving behind a silence that somehow carried more weight than anything either of them could have said. That night shifted something in all of them, not because of the money and not just because of the gesture itself, but because of what it uncovered. For Sophia, it was the realization that real wealth has nothing to do with numbers and everything to do with moments. For Daniel, it was a reminder that even in the depths of his hardest days, there were still people in this world who were capable of genuine kindness. But the story didn't stop there. In the days that followed, Sophia couldn't shake them from her mind. The image of Lily's smile, the quiet steadiness in Daniel's eyes. It stayed with her, refusing to let go. It made her question everything she thought she understood about happiness, about purpose, about what a life well lived actually looks like. So she did something that surprised even herself. She tracked them down. Not out of curiosity, not out of any sense of duty, but out of something deeper that she simply couldn't push aside. When she finally crossed paths with Daniel again, she didn't show up with grand gestures or sweeping offers. She came with something straightforward, an opportunity, a real chance for him to rebuild his footing, to grow, to reach toward a future he had nearly talked himself out of believing in. Daniel was guarded at first. Life had made him that way. He had learned to be skeptical of anything that seemed too convenient, too good to be true. But there was something honest in the way Sophia came to him, a genuine desire to help without stripping away his dignity in the process. And slowly, things began to turn around. Daniel found solid ground again. Lily found her joy. And Sophia finally found what she had been quietly searching for her whole life, a sense of real purpose that no bank account could ever provide. Their lives wove together in ways none of them had planned or predicted, not as a story of charity, but as a story of real human connection, growth, and change that ran in all directions. Because sometimes the extraordinary things don't come from big dramatic moments. Sometimes they come from one simple act of kindness, and that one act can set off a chain of events that none of us could have imagined. Before we reach the end, go ahead and drop a comment that says, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe that one small act really can transform someone's world. As the years moved forward, Daniel often found himself going back to that night in his mind. The coins on the table, the quiet worry, the fear of letting his daughter down. And every time he did, he arrived at the same truth. He hadn't failed her, not even close. Because even in his most difficult moments, he had given Lily something that no sum of money could ever come close to replacing: love, resilience, and the courage to keep showing up. And Sophia finally understood that the emptiness she had carried for so long wasn't a sign that something was missing from her life. It was a sign that she hadn't yet found what she was truly living for. If this story moved you, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe. You never know whose hands it might find its way into, or whose day it might completely turn around. Because in a world that can so often feel cold and indifferent, kindness is still the most powerful force any of us carries.